The screenwriting process for The Rings of Power is an elaborate one. First, the writers develop a draft where a Celtic and Nordic feudal fantasy epic penned by a Catholic old gent nearly a century ago can be enhanced and improved upon by being made to reflect the modern world. Next, the draft is circulated among the homeless community, where the warm, splattered diarrhea of their most unwashed is smeared over the paper with an extra coating of fecal filth added from the lavatory at a truck stop. Then, using advanced motion sensor technology at a cemetery, they are able to locate the final resting places of generations of former writers who are literally rolling over in their graves. Exhume them, grind up their bones into a powder to be mixed grittily into the excrement-soaked pages of the script, and then run that document through a chain of Amazon executives, each contributing COVID sneezes, dandruff, semen spray, and other effluvia until the finished product, a sopping, barely intelligible mess, is retranscribed by a diversity hire intern who has lost one contact lens. Here are some simple changes I came up with that might have made the first couple of episodes better. Let's see if we can save them.
Yeah, no. Freaking wingman. We'll save your ass. We'll save your ass.
In this early scene, instead of the on-the-nose, crude simplicity of a bullying boy delivering an insult like something out of a school play, wrecking Galadriel's boat, then her pushing the boy to the ground and stoically preparing to punch him, followed by an elf who seemed to base his persona on Chris Martin from Coldplay, delivering a momentum-killing, hopeless attempt at stoner philosophy and cod wisdom. They could have used something similar to this scene from Alexander, where the young Greeks of the future listened to a lecture from a philosopher, which would have allowed for subtle looks between the children to imply their rivalries and tensions, and allowed for some charming exposition about elven ethics and tales of far-off lands. At the outset, Galadriel is portrayed as virtually infallible and fearless, in a way that makes it hard to feel much, because it allows so little scope for growth and learning as a character. It would have been better if she had a character flaw of hubris, her stubborn refusal to relent in her search actually leading to one or a succession of the other elves perishing because of her blind desire. She has to personally contend with one slipping from her grasp over a ledge to their death, or disappearing from her sight in a roiling tide. Such a scenario would have created a possibility for self-doubt, moral uncertainty, and inner conflict or buried regret. Things that would have quickly made her a richer and more complex character who would interest us, with the possibility of an arc toward growth, greater compassion, and a willingness for such sacrifices to be justified. This would have been better than the muddled picture we had, with her willing to let a freezing elf lie down and die in a snowy gale, then this not actually happening, then an elf revolt, then abandoned revolt, then her crushing the gigantic troll creature thing pretty much just by her near-infallible awesomeness. Shampoo commercial Elrond is introduced as too inert, too passive. His affection for Galadriel is too gushing. It would have been more affecting to make his interest slightly conditional, at a slight remove, a fondness balanced by a gently chastising tone that she is being frustratingly unreceptive to being more open. You know, in the way men and women, or people in general, often actually interact with each other. Instead of a group of random shipwrecked people who we only know for a couple of minutes, why not dispense with them and just begin the whole sequence with the Luna? The gigantic sea snake in the distance, trailing the remnants of the boat, would have been just as effective, and cut unnecessary fat from the story, and allowed for a deeper mystery about the solitary shipwrecked stranger, concentrating on the dynamic between the two, quicker and more effectively. Instead of making Nori give an unsubtle, poorly written and tedious speech about wanting to explore distant lands, it would have been more effective to lean into her being a half-foot and full of a mixture of curiosity and trepidation about the outside world. It would have been more stirring and charming to have replicated the sensation Sam experiences in the Fellowship of the Ring, standing on the edge of the furthest field he's ever walked to. This would have heightened the sense of adventure and daring and tension, allowing for more character growth, making her more appealing. The show allows us to see the glory of Khazad-dûm before it became known as Moria. The contrived, terrible stone-breaking scene, which served to fill up screen time, could have been written by a 12-year-old. It seemed such an unlikely scenario for a graceful elf to ever find himself in, or consent to. It isn't entertaining, and in terms of narrative drive it achieves nothing, as Prince Durin ultimately allows for Elrond to stay regardless. A more compelling alternative would have been to create tension through a delayed appearance of Durin, raising the possibility of his not deigning to receive Elrond personally, and rather have a significant high-ranking dwarf accost him in front of a crowd of dwarves, creating a mood of tension and uncertainty, of provocation and mockery. and break that at the last moment before it escalates into something genuinely mean-spirited, with the diffusing appearance of Durin, still retaining a dramatic tension as he is stony-faced, and they're then ascending up the mine and having their conversation. There is a genuinely idiotic sequence where Theo is seemingly so irate at mice that he smashes his way through the floorboards. This would have been easily fixed by his stamping lightly in annoyance, then hearing immense creaking around him, and when he peers closer, his leg crashes through the boards, weakened by the excavation beneath, then his falling through. There is then an odd hiding scene involving both mother and son, in separate hiding places, which creates a straining for a focal point. Instead, it would have been more effective to have Theo not present, filling the viewer with a sense of dread about his whereabouts and fate, and instead of an odd fight sequence involving mother and son, so bizarre, with some strange thing involving an attempted hanging, then a throwing of red powder, you could have had Theo return at the last moment, a surprise and release of tension and tipping of the scales. Almost immediately after, no mention is made of the incident. The relationship and manner between mother and son seems strangely calm and assured, despite the prior near-death struggle from a home invasion. This last sequence in the village needed a sense of bustle, urgency, tension, ideally with the mother calling out anxiously, trying to organize and get her son away from their household and on the way to safety. Then cut to the shot of him brandishing the sword hilt, adding an extra sense of urgency about what is unfolding there too. This show cost about $1 billion. They could have scouted round for the best writers in Hollywood. They could have scouted round for the best writers in a random Arby's. Instead, we get this trite, clumsy, and listless storytelling with a bunch of elementary fixes that could have maybe made it half decent.